Hello and welcome to Property Question Time. I'm Stephen Galpin and this is the programme where you can have your property related questions answered by our team of experts. And with me today, Ranjan Bhattacharya, founder of Succeed in Property. Hello Ranjan, welcome to you too. Long time since we've seen you on this programme.
Yes, great to be back, Stephen.
Well, good, and welcome back to you. Do the panel think that it's really a good idea to convert empty high street premises to residential buildings? It occurs to me that with probably no parking or other useful facilities like medical support, green spaces or schools nearby, this could turn into a social problem for the residents.
Okay, I really wonder who's written in that question, actually. There's several ways of, I think
Ranjan, you know, we have this question quite a lot come up. And I think it's because people are worried about losing their high street facilities, it changing to residential. And then if we go back some years, the criticism of planners were that they didn't build the infrastructure around their developments. And I think that's the angle that this person's coming from.
I think the fear is a little bit unfounded, because I think from a property developer's point of view or an investor's point of view, you're going to look to do something that gives you the best return for that unit. Now, if you've got a high street, so you've got a Boots and a W.H. Smith and you've got a shop in the middle, to make that residential would be nuts. First of all, who would want to live in that sort of busy, high footfall, high traffic type? And it's completely the wrong type of redevelopment for that street. It's not that people are looking to put a residential property in between a W.H. Smith and a Boots on a busy high street. It's about dealing with the fact that we have an oversupply of shops nationally, particularly in secondary parades and tertiary parades, where you've just got 4 or 5 random oddball shops and no footfall because everyone's buying stuff over the internet and that kind of stuff. So there's not that sort of demand in those sort of areas. So rather than it be empty, it's best that it has an alternative use. But what we find, because we do a lot of these conversions, is that we're making apartments which are usually 1-bedroom apartments, and they're usually in places where there is infrastructure, and the kind of people that want to live in those sort of apartments tend to be single people and couples. So the schools issue is rarely a problem.
Okay.
Also, transport connections are usually there, particularly in areas where there are shops. Many of the ones that we've done, their bus stops are just within 100 yards, which negates the need for that. And interestingly enough, in the development, we did one last year where we were able to provide 4 car parking spaces, and we did, but it is rented out. I don't think we have had, I think we've only had 1 person that ever had a car. You know, we've done these developments in town centres. Another one we did about 10 years ago where we got 8 car parking spaces for 8 flats. And the problem is that people coming, visiting the town, park their car in that space.
Yes.
But none of the residents have cars, because typically now people live in these sort of locations to be free of having the costs of owning a car, because all the amenities are immediately around.
Okay, good. And just in general, how do you feel? I mean, I walk down Oxford Street, I see a lot of the big stores closed or the shops empty there. Who's going to fill these shops?
Oxford Street is a different dynamic. You know, they are now, a lot of people want to be in Oxford Street because Oxford Street is in London, and London is a world city. So when you go to a hotel around the world and you check in at reception, and you see the clocks above the reception desk, there's always New York, London, Tokyo, Paris. You don't see Cardiff or Birmingham. No one cares. I'm sorry, guys, but no one cares. London is an international city.
No, you'll get told off the same as I do for being too London-centric. I think
the consequence of that is London, international brands want to be represented in those international cities. So you're starting to see, rather than product type stores on Oxford Street, Regent Street, these brands that want to show that they have a presence in London, and they're having more showrooms as status
flagship stores.
Flagship stores,
yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
And they're opening those up in those international cities, and London's still one of them.
Okay, great. Well, on that note, we're going to go to a break. So join me after the break when we'll hear more of your questions.
We'll get back to the video in just a moment, but what I wanted to really tell you about was what is the most exciting opportunity in property right now, and that is repurposing defunct commercial buildings to residential use. Now, most people don't really know where to start, what to look for, and how to exploit these opportunities, and that's why I've prepared 90 minutes of free training for you to get you started on this wonderful journey. You can register for this free training at property-workshop.com. Join me on that free training, and I'll leave you to enjoy the rest of the video.
Ranjan, with the new permitted rights rules affecting planning consents, I understand that essentially it's to assist conversion to residential property from a perhaps high street shop. However, I read complaints from a number of developers that some local authorities are refusing to implement or allow such rights. Can the panel clarify the situation? Is this not a government directive?
Yeah, well, I mean, let's just go back to why permitted development exists. The planning system in the UK is unfit for purpose. It brings no certainty to developers, and that is a massive problem. We've got massive shortage of housing supply and all of that. So to circumvent that, what the central government have done, just for England, you have to blame the Welsh devolved government and Scottish devolved government for why you haven't got it there.
Right.
But just in England, we have permitted development. So there's a central government saying, if you tick these boxes, you follow these criteria, then you're pretty much good to go in terms of converting that building into flats subject to certain criteria. Now, the councils, of course, hate that, because when you apply for planning permission, you apply to the Development Control Department. They want to be on top and control everything. And it's usually computer says no, in my experience. But the permitted development doesn't give them much wriggle room. The wriggle room they have is a fight back mechanism called an Article 4. So they can apply to the central government for an Article 4 directive that allows them to be exempt from a PD right, from a particular PD right within a tightly defined area. Now, the government in the summer have really tightened up the criteria by which a local authority can apply for an Article 4. Because in the old days, before this summer, they could have a borough-wide and a local authority-wide ban on doing particular conversion.
This is the sort of thing that happened with HMOs, for instance, wasn't it?
Yes, yeah. You can't do, it's got to be tightly defined, and you've got to identify buildings for which it applies and all of that. Now, the thing is, some London councils have, particularly London councils, happens in the higher value areas and that kind of, where the councils are a bit lefty. I think they just don't want to see gentrification of the areas and all of this for political reasons, but that's another story. But in some of these London councils they're playing a very strange PR game. They're saying they're going to apply. They're saying they've got Article 4, but they haven't got it yet, because it takes, first of all, they've got to apply to the Secretary of State, who's got to consider their application. They've got to put all the evidence up. Then, if the Secretary of State grants the council an Article 4 exemption, they've got to put everyone on 1 year's notice before it comes into effect. So in the borough of Richmond, for example, the council are promoting as though this Article 4 has already come into effect, but it hasn't. It comes into effect on August 2022. So one of my students is actually converting a shop. We're making the front keeping the front as a shop, but we're making the back into a 2-bedroom flat. 56 days to get the permitted development. It'll be done before the Article 4 comes in. So there's a phenomenal benefit for first mover advantage. There are limited places where people are getting these Article 4s, but where they are, the council are kind of saying, they're talking as though it's already in place, but it ain't. Look at the detail and you'll see that they're all coming into force at a future time.
And how would you challenge your local council on that?
It is what it is.
What's the process there for challenging that?
They don't resist it. If the Article 4 is not coming into place until August 2022, they've got no authority to reject it. There would just be an appeals procedure which they'd lose, and they'd lose their costs.
Yeah. As you say, it's a PR exercise. Thank you very much indeed. Great answers. So big thank you to Ranjan Bhattacharya for our programme today. Great technical answers. I'm sure our viewers will be most appreciative. I'm Stephen Galpin. Join me again next time on Property Question Time.